CBN News thanks the Cleveland Clinic for making this program possible. Today from the Global Lane, acting on impulse at her lowest time, 18-year-old Katie Stubblefield took a rifle and shot herself in the face. She survived and later became the youngest recipient of a face transplant. How could this happen to a former pastor's daughter? And what role did God and the Cleveland Clinic play in helping Katie find a new face and life? What Katie and her parents want you to know if you're thinking about ending your own life. And it's all right here, right now, from the Global Lane. Each year, about 1 million people commit suicide worldwide. That's about one tragic end to a life every 40 seconds, or 3,000 per day. Today, we bring you the amazing story of a family caught up in tragedy. In March 2014, Katie Stubblefield failed in the attempt to kill herself. The non-fatal gunshot wound to her face caused her to lose most of her vision and the ability to speak. Her face was terribly disfigured, but she found hope and help in God and a team of medical professionals at the Cleveland Clinic. Last year in May 2017, Katie became the youngest person in the world to receive a full face transplant. It took years in and out of the hospital, a 31-hour surgery, and 3 subsequent operations. She still needs therapy and treatments, but Katie has found new life out of the darkness. Katie Stubblefield, her mom Elisa, and her dad Robert join us from the Ronald McDonald House at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. They're here to share their amazing story. So Robert, Elisa, most parents of children who have attempted or committed suicide say they were unaware that their child was having issues. They never really had a clue that something was wrong. What was your experience?
I would say, obviously initially, Elisa was physically close by and in the scene, if you would, so to speak. I was at work that day. So obviously it was one of just unbelief. It was very surreal, shock, horror, because there was nothing that would give a telltale sign. I was a minister for over 20 years, almost 25 years, and dealt with a lot of counseling situations. And this time I'm in a place to where there was nothing there. There was nothing that was a precursor to saying something like this could be on the horizon.
Robert, you were at work. What was your reaction when you were first told that your daughter had shot herself?
Well, it was pure shock, because I was at work. My wife was there. She called me, and her words to me were that Katie's gone. And I said, "What do you mean gone?" I knew that she'd been upset over some particular dynamics and went to her brother's home. And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, she shot herself. And at that moment, I'm literally, I was in a planning area at the school, and I literally remember standing straight up and looking straight ahead. And you've seen the old movies to where the camera kind of zooms in one of those kind of moments, and it was like an immediate tunnel vision. And then from that point, I began to, go and get someone to take me to the site, which was probably less than 10 minutes away, and it was horrific.
Elisa, what was your experience?
Total shock. I think I was in shock for days, probably. We had raised 2 other teenagers, and Katie, by far, was probably our easiest teenager. God had been quite gracious to us. We had some a few things in life, but overall our kids, they were pretty easy on us. And to think that Katie would have even thought about hurting herself blew me probably off the map. We talked a lot in our family about everything you could possibly talk about it. I remember talking with Katie one night about, Rick Warren's son, I think it was, we were talking about, I think he had some depression. But then we talked about, teenagers and, sometimes how when things happen, how you would react. And we kind of, with our kids, would not say, if this happens, we'd say, when you get into this situation, tell us what you would do. And so our kids would tell us, well, Mom. And Katie and I had pretty much talked about everything. And so we just prepared Katie for, Katie always had a deep soul. When Katie made a commitment to anything or anybody, it was always usually 10 times more what other people would do. So we always knew that about Katie. But at the same time, we also felt like Katie was always our type kid that would think things through before she reacted. But on that day, she didn't. And, you know, we'll never know exactly what went on in the closet that day. Katie was a hunter herself. I mean, she went hunting in high school. All three of our kids did it, some a little bit for the culture where they were. I don't think any of them were lifelong hunters, but they all did it a little bit because of the culture. But Katie knew gun safety. So when she went to her brother's closet that day, do we think she actually really wanted to die? I would probably say no. I pretty much would say no. Do I think she had a impulsive moment? Yes. Katie will tell you by her own admission that she said, I guess I lost my way for a while, Mom. Whether it was 5 minutes or an hour, I lost my way. And she can't go backwards, we have to go forward. But as far as her attempting to hurt herself in any way, shape, or form, totally blew me off the map.
When we come back, a look at the amazing team of doctors and medical care personnel at the Cleveland Clinic who worked tirelessly to help rebuild Katie's face and life.
Angels were created to serve God. These magnificent beings have awesome power beyond our comprehension.
CBN presents Angels, Their Power, Purpose, and Presence. In Pat's latest DVD, you'll get the biblical insight into these mysterious spiritual creatures and discover the important role they play in God's kingdom and in your life.
We're also going to meet real people who have come face to face with these divine creatures and have experienced what can only be described as miraculous, life-changing encounters.
As he started pulling me through, it was just a burst of white light.
My thought is the angels were there to hold me together.
I knew that this was something that was happening and it was supernatural.
Angels, their power, purpose, and presence.
Call now or go to CBN.com to get your copy of Angels.
Hello, I'm Terry Mewson. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
After her failed suicide attempt, the medical team at the Cleveland Clinic performed a surgery never done before on someone as young as Katie Stubblefield, a face transplant. A doctor in Memphis recommended the rare and delicate surgery.
The head doctor there came to Rob and I and said, I really think the only thing that's going to help Katie get back life, and he said it would be a face transplant. And we had heard that term one other time, but Rob and I really didn't know exactly about a face transplant. But we talked with this head trauma surgeon down there, and he said the chances of Katie getting in, he said, I didn't even know whether to bring it up to you because the chances of her getting in are pretty slim because of she has so many things going on. She's so frail. He said, but I've made some calls, and he said the first place is the Cleveland Clinic, and he said there's only a few hospitals in the country that do these. He said, but that would be, if this call comes through, he said, and this doctor was a good Catholic man, he goes, don't think about it, don't pray about it, I don't care what you have to do, just get on the plane and go. And we're like, oh, okay. He goes, he said, that's all you have to do. because he was getting ready to leave to go to his son's graduation, and he said, I may not ever see you guys again, but if that call comes through, go. And it did come through. It happened in a matter of hours. That's pretty an unbelievable story how that happened too. It happened so quickly. And then when we arrived here in Cleveland, my husband came up with her on the May the 2nd, the flight, because only one parent could go. So I told him, you'll have to be answering questions, because to be honest with you, even 5 weeks later, it was just still so surreal that we were walking through this. And so he went with Katie on the plane on the May the 2nd. And then I came up a day later because I got stuck in the Chicago airport. But from the time we got here, our Dr. Gassman, I think he was probably shocked at what he had committed to also, because, you know, he's thinking transplant. And then the next thing I think he's thinking is, I just want to keep this girl alive, because I don't think he really knew what he was getting into either. I mean, he may, I don't think so though. But then from there, the Cleveland Clinic has just, God has just been extremely gracious to us with our team of transplant doctors. Katie has had so many procedures, so many surgeries, and we're still not there. She still has to have some revision. We still have a whole full year of therapy on steroids. But the Cleveland Clinic and our doctors here have, I mean, they saved her life in Memphis, don't get me wrong. They literally, in Memphis, they kept her alive, but here in Cleveland Clinic, at the Cleveland Clinic, we've just had some of the best doctors probably in the country, and probably even the world. But we know as Christians that God has given us the doctors that He wants for Katie, and I don't think there's probably a day that goes by that we don't thank the Lord for the doctors that have been placed in Katie's life.
How are things now, 1 year later, after that transplant surgery?
I would say it's there's a lot of progress. Some people think that when you have the surgery of this kind of situation, that in a matter of 5-6 weeks you move on, but it's a slow train coming, so to speak. It's something to where a major thing has happened. I call it the mothership of surgeries, but it's a situation to where there's just so much yet to be done. It's a thing to where we just have things that have to be accomplished, certain levels with speech, especially in rehabs and strengthening. So we've come a long ways, and we still have a long ways to go.
So I guess it doesn't really matter what your profession is; it could happen to anyone.
There was I remember when my son was very little, and we were pastoring a small church in another state somewhere. He did something, and somebody said, "Robert, and you're the pastor's son." And he looked at her like, what do you mean? What's that supposed to mean? He was clueless to that, because we didn't raise them in a fishbowl. Other times, many people I know, stereotype wise, they would try to put you in a fishbowl, but we never quite fit into that. We were kind of outside the box in a lot of regards. But some people in this setting, I do know that along the way there's probably a few that have said, how could this happen to a family who professes faith, and especially maybe at one time was in this kind of thing vocationally and so forth. Yeah, people have certain criteria and expectation that is just it's extraordinarily unrealistic. It doesn't matter. The thing that is so true in this journey that I know many people may or may not understand is that this type of thing, when there's an attempted self-harm of an individual, this type of thing does not respect religion. It doesn't respect socioeconomic status, your color, your culture. That has nothing to do with anything. But this is something that is just there's an element out there, that an unseen element that really is, I guess for a lack of a better word, a force to be reckoned with, and an attack upon so many lives, especially at this age.
And when we return, finding strength to overcome through faith. Where was God in the midst of Katie's ordeal? Also, some final words for those who may be thinking about ending their life.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible. playing great games,
Did you win?
watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
What's your emergency? We have a vehicle that is upside down and on fire. These people are trapped and we need the jaws of life.
My feet were on fire. The car was filling up with smoke.
There was fire coming in through my left door. The steering wheel was stuck in my chest. I couldn't move.
The seatbelt, I kept trying to release it, but it wouldn't release.
And I just screamed, God, send your angels now.
I saw a set of just white hands. It was just a burst of white light.
Attempted suicide and facial reconstruction. Now God and the Stubblefields. This wasn't just a short-term surgery. You guys spent years in the hospital, multiple surgeries. How did you ever get through it?
Well, the bottom line is that we have a relationship with Christ, and that may sound cliche-ish to many people, but it's one of those situations. We both came from a Christian faith background. That's who we are, and that's what we've been for so long. But this was a scenario where it went from just what you believed, your faith value system, and your upbringing or anything like that. It came to the point to where you faced something that put a demand on it, and it was something that either this was real or this was not real. And for us, it was real, and it was our ultimate recourse of where we found our strength, our sanity, our ability to cope.
Robert, you're a former pastor. Some people might say, how could this ever happen to a pastor's family? His child attempting suicide.
I had been out of the pastorate for a number of years when all this had transpired, but in backing up, the backstory on that would be the way we raised our kids is that I had a philosophy, a mindset, and it probably got me in more trouble than it helped me. It was that I used to tell people that, first of all, I'm a guy, I'm a human being who is a Christian who just so happens to be a pastor. And I kept in that order. We raised our kids in as much of a everyday normality mindset as anybody else.
We always said at the end of the day, we have our relationship with Christ, and then we have our family. And there's nothing or anything that we can't walk through together. So we kind of that was always the thing that that was like my rock foundation. So to think that any of my kids would have hurt themselves, I have to be honest with you, I was very blinded to that. And so this whole thing with Katie has opened my heart and mind up, because I have had, being in the Christian world my whole life, I have had some dear friends and some not so dear ask me, like, how could Katie and why? And even a Christian, I mean, Katie came to know, I would say, if you ask Katie when she accepted Jesus as her Savior, she would tell you when I was a little girl. That's what she would tell you. But, people that are Christians get cancer. People that are Christians go through divorce. People that are Christians have teenage kids that drink and drive. I've learned there's not one thing we're exempt from. And I really didn't think that it could happen. It wasn't that I thought that things couldn't happen, but this particular thing, suicide, taking life being so precious, and it's a gift, and there's nothing you can't, there's always someone to talk to. There's always, and like Katie just said, your problems are temporary. They're not permanent. some things may last longer, but when you're 18 sometimes and you're going through rejection and pain and lots of things, you because of the way God wired that brain, that frontal lobe, that cortex, they're very impulsive. It's not always mental health. I do think there are a lot of teenagers that have mental health issues. I'm not putting down mental health, but a lot of times, we've been with our psychiatrist here at the clinic for 4 years, and she knows Katie very well. And she has told us all along that she felt like Katie's, which she's dealt with a lot of this in her years of her profession, was definitely impulsivity. But that's something I think that we have to educate youth more about, because, you know, I think in high schools we talk about drinking and driving, we talk about drugs, we talk about safe sex, but we don't talk about the soul issues too much.
Katie, what do you want people to know about suicide and what has happened to you? I'm sure this has been very painful, a lengthy ordeal, but you're still alive and God is good.
People are always going to have some sort of problem they're going through, but it's temporary, not permanent. God is good. Always someone can talk to you. You can always find someone who will listen to you and who truly cares.
Elise and Katie's statements have shattered everything overall. That, you know, obviously, number one, that life is a precious thing. I mean, that's an immediate thing. But I think a thing to recognize is that there's something there that really is after the lives of young people, whatever the age bracket might be, and that we are, as Elisa said, we're not exempt from many different angles that would try to attack our lives and come at us, but to recognize on a practical basis that if you are in those low places, whether you've had symptomatic things or not, whether it's just impulsivity, reach out to someone, whether it's a priest, a pastor, a rabbi, a friend, a relative, anybody. There's some human being somewhere that you can latch onto, that you can communicate with. And at the end of the day, that there is a God who is here, and that He will help and He will strengthen, and that you are not alone. Ultimately, you are not alone, and you do not have to choose, as has been said before, a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
We often hear about America's opioid epidemic, but did you know there were almost as many suicide deaths in the United States in 2016 as there were opioid deaths? It's a national crisis. U.S. veterans are among the most susceptible. Their suicide rate is double the rate for non-veterans. The annual suicide rate for veterans is about 30 out of every 100,000. The civilian suicide rate about 14 per 100,000. Folks, we've got to do more to prevent this. 20 veterans each day take their lives. That's unacceptable for one of the world's wealthiest nations. Last year, I discussed veteran suicide with my congressman, Scott Taylor. He's a former Navy SEAL who understands all too well some of the causes. He also offered some solutions to help our veterans.
People don't reach out to the VA. They just don't. You know, they don't call the suicide hotline. They're not walking up there. They're looking for potentially someone else who understands them, other veterans that are sort of emergency response to help them out and their families. And again, there's that gap when they leave the service, become veterans. So my office is working on a suicide prevention program, actually right here in Virginia Beach and the surrounding areas, to look at that gap, to say, okay, let's look at a public-private partnership that brings the VA in, that brings folks that are working on traumatic brain injury and PTSD and depression, and also a quick response force, if you will, that can go right to that veteran's house 24/7 to bring them in, to help them in, and to keep them close to their families as well too. So I think that we need to change the way that we look at suicide prevention with the VA, and we certainly need a uniform policy across the VA for people who actually physically walk there.
Native Americans are another neglected group. Did you know our indigenous population suffers from a suicide rate of 60% higher than the general population? At one time, the rate of the Crow Creek Sioux Reservation in South Dakota was 7 times the national rate. Our Mark Martin once visited that reservation. He talked to the people there. One man explained why he attempted to end his life.
I thought I was all alone and everything like that, and I tried committing suicide. And the person that found me was my oldest daughter.
That is common. Many of those attempting suicide say they felt they were all alone. But as Katie Stubblefield said, there's always someone who cares, someone who will listen. Many Christian ministry groups are working with Native American reservations and veterans, sharing the love of Christ, reaching out to those to help them. Many people who may be thinking about suicide, also people suffering from alcohol and substance abuse. Sandy Gabe is a Native American who found help.
Well, all they have to do is reach out their hand like I did, and God took my hand and gave me something, and I'm glad of that.
God loves you, and He has a better plan for your life. So if you are contemplating suicide, or you need help overcoming an addiction, or you're just finding it hard to cope with life, there's always someone you can turn to. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Or the CBN prayer line, 1-800-700-7000. And remember what God said in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. He has plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.